because this is a Catholic talk, you always have to have at least one reference to Thomas Aquinas. So let me just do that right away so I don't forget. The great Aquinas quote that grace builds upon nature. So we're going to talk about nature here, but all the time try to kind of connect it the way that God's grace impacts us. All right, so now Lorraine's going to talk about the choleric temperament. I introduced to you Laraine Bennett.
Okay. Well, I have a confession to make. Before I knew about temperaments, I used to think that art was just like me, only bad. But then I learned about the temperaments, and I discovered that those peculiar characteristics that he had, that I thought he was doing on purpose to annoy and harass me, I discovered that these were actually aspects of his God-given temperament. So it's the way he's hardwired. It's God's gift to him as part of his personality. So I discovered that when he doesn't, for example, answer a question right away, like, what do you want to do tonight? Or what do you think about this great idea I have? And he doesn't answer right away. It's not because he's angry at me, or he's like antisocial or something like that. It's actually he needs to think about things longer than I do. So I would respond right away, but he responds slowly. So immediately we have already, like, a whole bunch of arguments and misunderstandings are immediately diffused just by understanding temperaments. And it's a great help to us in our marriage. And also, it brings us, like, kind of to the real reason to understand temperaments. It's not to label yourself. It's not to put people in a box. It's not so that you can become a temperament bully. That's just the way I am, girlfriend. It's rather so that we can become more understanding and accepting of ourselves and others. And we can, in fact, the more we understand our temperament, the less we're going to fall prey to just falling into a habitual reaction along the same lines of our temperament. We can become more free to choose to respond in different ways. Each temperament has its own strengths and weaknesses, and once you understand your temperament, you'll be more likely to understand quickly what are the virtues that you most need to grow in, and also where we really need to rely on Christ. So we're going to do a brief overview of the four temperaments, the classic four temperaments, and we're going to try to show how we can become true Christian leaders who use God's gifts to lead souls to Christ. So the four temperaments, as Art already mentioned, choleric, phlegmatic, sanguine, and melancholic. So the choleric, I'm starting with the choleric. That's some people say choleric. Anyway, your original type A personality. So they have quick, intense, and long-lived reactions. And it makes them decisive, tenacious, and driven to follow through. They're determined, energetic, forceful, and confident. Now, what you want to remember about cholerics is that they love to be in charge. And they don't have to have any actual experience in the situations in which they decide to take charge. We can all think of a notable public figure who exemplifies this. I'm going to build a great wall. It's going to be the best wall, right? Cholerics are fiercely independent, self-motivated, and strong-willed. They're sometimes accused of rolling over people once they've set a plan in motion, of being stubborn and demanding, opinionated, competitive, argumentative. Now, any of you out there who are cholerics, that won't bother you. You'll say, thank you for the compliments. As an example, our youngest daughter, Lucy, is a choleric like me. And she was helping us. We also wrote a book on the temperament God gave your kids. Anyway, so she was helping with that. I had a list of strengths and weaknesses, and I was saying, read over these strengths and weaknesses and tell me what you think. And she reads over and she goes, I just have one question here. I don't understand why always right is in the weakness column. So cholerics are the ones who are always debating everything you say. They can be diverted at the drop of a hat into a debate. And I like to give the example of St. Paul. He was undoubtedly a choleric. In Athens, Paul grows exasperated by all the idols. Quote, "So he debated in the synagogue with the Jews and the worshipers, and daily in the public square with whoever happened to be there." Paul even disagreed openly with Peter, the first pope. Quote, "I opposed him to his face because he clearly was wrong." In Acts, it says about Paul that, quote, "He even addressed the Greek-speaking Jews and debated with them. They, for their part, responded by trying to kill him." Cholerics sometimes provoke that kind of response. So cholerics, they can stir up arguments almost in their sleep. And if you're a choleric yourself, you want to be aware that you have this tendency. You have this tendency to debate and argue and stir up trouble. And be aware of the virtues that might be the most challenging and yet necessary to grow as a Christian leader. And that those virtues will be humility, patience, empathy, compassion. Learn to listen, to have empathy, to turn the other cheek when necessary. And here's a tip. If you're a choleric, practice being open to influence. This is a communication habit that requires humility. And it's a sign of a true Christian leader. Humility is a virtue that doesn't come easy to cholerics, but it means we have to practice it all the more. Even if we don't agree with someone, with what they're saying, we should be willing to hear the other's point of view, to listen respectfully, and to try to understand. Let me give you an example. So a number of years ago, Art came home one day, he was all excited, and he goes, "You know what I really want to do? Okay, I just heard about this thing. You get dropped from a helicopter onto the top of Mount McKinley, and then you got your backpack, and you kind of have to navigate your way. You don't even have, a map, and you kind of navigate by the stars, and you get yourself home that way." And I, the loving and supportive spouse, said, "Art, that is the stupidest idea I ever heard you say." Anyway, so that was not an example of, that was not being open to influence, because what happened, that effectively shut down all communication. So what we have to practice as cholerics is to, even if we don't agree with the other person, we say, "Well, tell me more about that. How about," you could say, "How does this, what does this mean to you? What is this, why do you want to do this? How does it fit into your hopes and dreams?" That's an example of how, as a Christian leader, you would draw the other person out instead of shutting them down. And even if you're right, and in fact, of course, I was right, because the last time we went camping, we couldn't even get the Coleman stove to light. We left the kids in the tent, and Art and I drove off and looked for a Starbucks. Anyway, so, they were old enough, don't call CPS. Okay. So how does a choleric, already a natural leader, become a true Christian leader? Cholerics need to remember we are human beings, not doings. It's not about our action so much as Christ's action in us. Cholerics have a tendency to be demanding, always measuring productivity, accomplishments, and this can sometimes place a strain on their relationships. And actually, she's constantly demanding that other people do as much as she does, and she has a fear deep in her inside that she's not worthy unless she's doing as much as she is. But when the choleric realizes that she needs to allow Christ to work in her, when we realize that it's by God's grace alone that I have any of these gifts at all, and it's God alone who saves me, I cannot save myself, no matter how hard I work, then the freedom to become a true Christian leader will emerge. and I begin to treat others with empathy, compassion, to appreciate one another's gifts, and to allow others to participate, to work as a team. To see how God sees is to rest in his love, to see the beauty of quiet reflection, to step aside and let God be in charge. And I'm going to just end this section with a real quick quote from Psalm 44 that I happened to read today. "It was not in my bow that I trusted, nor yet was I saved by my sword. It was you who saved me from our foes." And that's a good psalm for a choleric to read. Art?
That was great. Thank you. We've been giving this talk for a while, and it's just a coincidence. We always start with the choleric part right away first. Okay. I know, so Laraine's choleric, and I'm not. And so how does that go? Well, it goes fine. Actually, I'm a phlegmatic, so I'm going to talk about the phlegmatics. So phlegmatics are the peacemakers. Whereas the choleric walks in the room, wants to rearrange the furniture, gets the job, rearranges the org chart, fires this person, brings that person in, mucks and mucks, changes. The phlegmatics come into a situation, and the intent is to not rearrange and lead, and it's to kind of fit in. It's whatever hand you're dealt, you kind of find, where's my spot here? Listen, I want to be a team player. I want to kind of fit in and see what's going on. Phlegmatics kind of lead with their ears, see, for a while, just to get the lay of the land and see how things are going. Whereas cholerics react very quickly and intensely, and that is important if you have a friend or spouse or somebody who has a different temperament. This is one of the areas that can sometimes be misunderstood, because Laraine basically makes hard decisions in milliseconds. Think of any disc jockey on the radio from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock p.m., because something happened today, and somebody's got to have a strong opinion on it right away, and that's called your person on the radio from 3 to 6. They'll have an opinion, whatever happened hours or minutes ago, they'll tell you that opinion, and they'll never change it, because they're right. Well, that's cholerics. Okay, the rest of us don't have that great gift. So what happens sometimes with a phlegmatic, like when Laraine and I leave a movie, as we're walking to the parking lot, she'll tell me about the movie. By the way, I don't even have to ask her opinion. It's brilliantly and freely given. She'll talk about the acting, Denzel Washington. She'll talk about the dialogue. And because I park the car, and I always take the first space, it's a long walk. Anyhow, she fights for parking spots, I settle. Anyhow, so we're walking to our car, and she's breaking the movie down, then she'll ask me, and she'll say the music was this or that, and I'll go, oh, was it a musical? I don't remember that. No, it had music in it. Okay, she breaks it down. So I'm pretty unimpressive on these situations. I don't have a great, strong idea immediately. So that's typical of phlegmatics. We like to think about things before we say what we think. We might want her to read the book first before she writes the review. No? Okay, that's fine. So the quick response of the choleric, that's not typical of the phlegmatics. We don't like to be forced to make particularly really pertinent decisions right away. We want to think things through. Phlegmatics tend to be pretty dependable, polite, humble, and even temperate. So humility comes rather naturally to a phlegmatic. Now you got to watch out you're not being a doormat and letting people roll over you, but to let other people, to say excuse me or go ahead is not that difficult a thing. It's a gift for the phlegmatics. As children of phlegmatics are quiet, docile, and obedient. So I don't know if you guys have kids yet or if you will have kids, but you want to keep having kids until you have at least one phlegmatic, because it will be the only one that does what you say. And you want to have one of those for your ego, Phlegmatics, although, have a weak link. The weak link of the phlegmatic would be the distaste and maybe sometimes even the hatred of conflict. They are peacemakers, but the hope of a phlegmatic is that I can have peace without battling, without fighting, without having to assert. Just kind of keep dodging punches my whole life, and everything will just work out fine. Of course, that really is not the way it goes. So conflict is the weak link for a phlegmatic. So if you're phlegmatic, you're harmony, you're a team player, but you gotta work on the conflict, and particularly the way the culture's going. You're going to just have a variety of opportunities to give a different opinion as the Catholic faith kind of gets more and more out of sync. You got to choose your battles and all that. But it's the opposite. The cholerics love to battle, love to fight. It's almost like a sport with them. Laraine and I go out to dinner with a couple we don't know, and she'll either bring up politics or religion. Just depends on her mood. Just depends which thing would be more interesting to fight for and stuff. And I kind of want to crawl under the table or or just look at the mail and say, "Could we go talk about the Redskins at the bar," or something like that, just make it easy. But that's a classic temperament thing, the tolerance for conflict, maybe even the delight in conflict, and then the abhorrence of conflict. So this is something we phlegmatics have to work on very carefully. And I also have a story about our phlegmatic son. He came home from school, and at that school you were asked once a week to bring home certain papers from the school and give them to your parents. Well, since he was phlegmatic, he would do that. Our other kids apparently got the same orders, and we never saw the papers. So anyhow, the phlegmatic takes it literally. So he gave us the thing. He was a junior at the time, high school, and we say, I was just looking at it. Whoa, this is interesting. Why don't you sit down a second? So you know what he did? He sits down. And then Laraine and I want to talk to him because look, they have student body elections in a couple weeks. Have you thought about running? He said, no, I've not thought about running for student body president. And one of us, probably Laraine, said it right away. So I think you should. Of course a choleric mom would say that. I think you should. And so we talked about it. And he said, well, you're pretty popular. You got the grade point average you need. What do you got to lose? Why don't you do it? And you know what he did? He did it. And then he won. See how easy it is with phlegmatic kids? Isn't that great? Now, what happened then was interesting. Because he won, he made promises to different constituencies in his little high school. Like, maybe, we're not going to have the dance at the Knights of Columbus Hall. We're going to go to the Hilton. Yeah, whatever. I know, so things played out. Things didn't go exactly as planned. So people got mad or angry, took sides. And this is really the best thing that can happen for a phlegmatic, because that's life, right? So he had to learn as a young man in a leadership position, he had to learn that when you make decisions, you disappoint some people, and some people are pleased. This is not that big a deal to the clerics as a rule, but is a tremendous cross for the phlegmatics. But I also often think, remember when Mother Teresa, I guess you guys weren't alive then, but you may have heard of it. Mother Teresa came to the prayer breakfast in Washington, D.C., down here. And she was flown in all the way from Calcutta. And, I think it was Democratic Congress, Democratic President. And so they asked her to give a talk. And I'm sure they were really hoping that she would just talk about the poor, or the spotted owl, something like that. But right out of the gate, after they have this big hall and all these people to see her, and they flew her in from India and they fly her back, she just started talking about abortion. She just started talking about the A word. And boy, people were memorizing that carpet in that hall that day. It was extremely tense because there were a lot of people of a different opinion. But I've always thought that was a great opportunity, that was a great example of, as far as I know, she's not, well, I don't know her temperament. It's hard to tell the saints' temperament, they're so balanced. But that was a moment where she had the audience, she had the cameras, she had the moment, and she seized it. And she talked about the scourge of our country. And sometimes, the phlegmatics, we gotta be reminded of that. You gotta sometimes take on conflict to be a leader and get things right. So that's the challenge for the phlegmatic. You want to get along, and I think the real message for the phlegmatic, for us phlegmatics, I guess I'm confessing here, is that true peace comes actually as a product of the truth and saying the truth. That doesn't always come right away. It's not always easy, and that's something that where it's natural for the choleric, something that has to be learned by the phlegmatic. There's other things as well. A certain kind of confidence. It's also the least naturally confident temperament. So it's very tempting to nag phlegmatics. Hurry up, give an answer, you can do better, that kind of thing. It doesn't work too well because it kind of pounds them into more discouragement. Better is really to remind them of the strengths that they have, the graces that God gives them, and the way that they can overcome things as well. You sometimes might have to remind them that sometimes Christ said turn the cheek, and sometimes Christ said let's turn over the tables. You want to be kind of prudent. Is this a cheek-turning situation, or is this a table-turning situation? And that would be called prudence, right? But if you just go by your temperament, you're never going to turn over tables. And if you just go by that temperament, you're never going to turn the cheek. So what you want in knowing the temperaments, knowing your strengths and weaknesses, is where do I need to work? Where do I need to come over? So I would say, in general, seeing things as Christ sees them. The phlegmatic is being confident. If you can say the truth, it might be a little rough. At the end, not only will that be, can you overcome that fear with God's grace, but also that peace will be the product of that. All right, now Lorraine's going to talk about the sanguine temperament.
Somebody once said that if phlegmatics ruled the world, we'd still be living in caves. They're like, this is okay. I'm happy with this. Anyway. So the sanguine is your classic people person. They're the life of the party, fun-loving and affectionate. They're eager to please and love to be the center of attention. They have quick, intense, but short-lived reactions. So they live in the present moment. As a result, the temperament is interested, optimistic, enthusiastic, but forgetful. So they arrive late, they forget their car keys, and even where they parked the car. But they always have a funny story about it, and so you forgive them. They're the most extroverted temperament. They're sociable, relational, spontaneous, and scattered. They're like butterflies that flit from flower to flower, from one interest to another. In school, they join lots of clubs, but then they forget to attend the meetings. Our sanguine son in high school signed up 1 year for every club. And then, of course, he forgot to attend the meetings. But he did show up on picture day. That, he explained, is what counts. I'm like, wait a minute. You don't play the violin. What are you doing in the violin club? Chess club? I don't think so. Anyway, sanguines they're very generous. They love to volunteer. So as an example, I'm part sanguine. So we're exact opposites. So I'm choleric sanguine, and Art is phlegmatic melancholic. Anyway, so as an example of my volunteering, we tend to volunteer not necessarily out of the most pure of intentions. So as an example was, there's a women's conference that we do in our diocese every year, and I love to volunteer for this. Like, I love to go every year, but it's because I like to see my friends that I haven't seen in a whole year, and I happen to see them there at this conference. And so I say, yeah, I'll be there, and I'll sit at the welcome table, and I'll hand out the packets. And I'm like, okay, so this 1 year I'm there, I've set up, and I'm sitting at the welcome table. My best friend Beth is sitting here. She's next to me. We've got our coffee and our donuts, and we're like, oh, hey, Sue, I haven't seen you. So, oh, this is so great. Oh, where have you been? I haven't seen you in so long. Oh, there's Debbie. Oh, look. Beth, look, oh my gosh, look at, there's so. Anyway, so we're chatting, and, we're loving it, and I'm drinking my coffee and eating my donuts, and then one of the people in charge of the conference, the women's conference, she goes, Laraine, I need you to help monitor the confession line upstairs. Stat. And I'm like, no, not the confession line. Now, I have nothing against confession. I mean, confession is one of my favorite sacraments. Seriously, I love confession. But I did not want to monitor the confession line. I had to go upstairs in the dark hallway, the long hallway, where there's like 15 priests behind doors, and I had to be like, shh. Everybody be quiet. Shh. Father Serby is in the door. Let's see, the third door on the right. Shh. No talking. I could hear all my friends. The sound is drifting up. The smell of the donuts, the coffee, the chatter. And I'm like, I'm up here in the silence. Oh my God. But it was Lent, so I offered it up. And I got home and I go, and Art says, oh, so how was the conference? I'm like, it was amazing. It was so great. But, oh, let me tell you, I had to monitor the confession line. Can you believe it? And Art goes, oh man, I would have loved to monitor the confession. It shows you how opposite we are. Now, St. Peter was a lovable but inconstant sanguine. Quote, Lord, I'm prepared to go to prison and to die with you, he fervently pronounces. A few hours later, Peter denies even knowing Jesus. At the Transfiguration, Peter enthusiastically offers to set up 3 tents on the spot, even though, as Scripture notes, quote, he did not know what he was saying. When Christ appears walking on the water, Peter impulsively joins him until he begins to sink. And of course, it was sanguine St. Peter who tries to talk Jesus out of the cross. And that's a classic sanguine move. They hate anything negative. But this is precisely what we sanguines need to overcome in order to become Christian leaders. So if you're a sanguine, some virtues that come naturally to you are forgiveness, joy, generosity. Virtues that might be worth striving for and may be more difficult would include perseverance, self-control, and striving for a deep interior life. St. Teresa of Avila is a great example. So again, you have to read what she was like as a young woman to be able to tell what what her natural temperament is, because when she's older, and all saints, they become very Christ-like, so it's hard to tell. But anyway, as a young woman, she used to love to sit in the parlor of the convent and chat with visitors. She was charming and attractive, and she had many visitors, and apparently even men would come and visit and would fall in love with her. And she was very witty and beautiful. But eventually, she came to understand that this was not the path to holiness. And so she began to embark on a very serious prayer life, which eventually led to her becoming a great mystic and author of many books on prayer and the interior life. And also, she used her charismatic leadership to reform the Carmelites and found many new convents. So when the sanguine learns to place her trust in God and allow him to work in her, she'll be able to use her natural gifts of joy, generosity, enthusiasm, and the ability to connect with people for the purpose of his kingdom, for God's purposes, not for the purpose of drawing attention to herself. The need to be acknowledged can place a strain on relationships with the sanguine, because the sanguine has this natural tendency to draw attention to herself. So she wants everyone to be happy around her, and she may overlook serious problems. She may also not want to talk about serious problems. But this deep fear of being overlooked, of being unhappy, of missing out, is transformed in Christ. When the sanguine realizes that God loves her just for who she is, she stops trying to seek the attention of others and instead strives to please Christ first and foremost. When the sanguine allows Christ to shine through her, then she becomes a true leader, a charismatic leader for Christ.
Excellent. All right, there's only one more temperament left. It's called the melancholic. Just to be clear, our view, I think this is the classic temperament view, is the gifts that you have are gifts from God. It's almost like to kind of kickstart you, he gives you certain gifts kind of almost unaccountably. And you might know somebody who has a great smile. Where they get that smile? They got the smile. Or some people have a lot of energy, some people have less energy. Some people are real intense, some people are real relaxed. These really are gifts for God. But they also point out the areas that are hard for us. So some things come easy, kind of natural, and some things we have to go out and get them. We have to go out and kind of acquire virtues is how we change. So our view is you're grateful for the temperament God gave you and the temperament God gave others. There's no temperament is better leader than another. You might argue maybe certain types of temperaments might be a better leader in certain types of situations than others. But I was talking about my phlegmatic son, and really of all the Bennetts, without a doubt, he's the best apostle. He's had about five people come into the Catholic Church. My score is 0. I don't know, what's your score? That means 0. So anyhow, he's the most congenial Bennett. Doesn't cause a lot of trouble, happy guy, man of faith, but he's actually had the best fortune and gift of really bringing people across into the faith. So we don't want to think that if you're thinking about your temperament, you don't want to think, well, I can't be a leader, I'm not a natural leader. That God will put us in situations where he wants our gifts to be used, and he'll want us to grow beyond just the gifts he gave us. So the last temperament is the melancholic. Melancholic is the opposite of the sanguine. The sanguine is the most extroverted temperament, scanning the room, excited about the world and what's going on and all the great things in life, whereas the melancholic is most introverted one. Sanguine is outgoing, optimistic, enthusiastic. Melancholic is cautious, rather pessimistic, but they wouldn't say pessimistic, they would say realistic. I'm realistic. And serious, because life is serious. There's important stuff we got to get done here. We can't be fooling around all the time, okay? Do I have to carry the burden of reminding you of that? If so, I will, says the melancholic. The sanguine reacts quickly, the melancholic reacts more slowly, but vehemently. So the sanguine and the choleric both react fast. The phlegmatic and the melancholic tend to be much more deliberate and not as quick. Once the reaction is registered, however, by the melancholic, it's very intense, and it's usually locked in. Melancholics, when they make a decision, they usually don't waver too much, but sometimes it can take them a while to make a decision. Give me an example. Our melancholic daughter actually went to school here at Catholic University, and she's having a great life. It's all working out great. Well, anyhow, she got a college job, but you know college jobs, not really jobs. It's kind of like glorified babysitting to give them some money to keep them alive. So she went to the fitness center. Somewhere here there's a fitness center, and her job was to make sure that the people that came to the middle of Catholic University campus and used the fitness center were indeed Catholic University students. Nobody was going to sneak in under her watch. Okay, so anyhow, what she would do is she checked the student body card, da-da-da. And as she was sitting there, it wasn't very busy. Right here is the yoga pad, over here is the bicycle, here's the weights, all the accoutrements of working out. And she studied those for a while. And then when she came home for Easter, which I guess is 7 or 8 months later, she told us that she got the job. We knew about the job. And she said, you know what? I think I might start working out. Now, she's been going there about 5 days a week. She could have worked out at any time. And I think it was Laraine who said, I wouldn't rush into that decision. I think you should think it over another decade before you make your mind up on that one, yeah. What happens with the melancholics is they so much want to be right, they just keep wanting more data, more information, more data. And at some point, 0.9999 needs to become 1. You just can't, and particularly now, today, where you can literally look up anything at any time. This can go on forever. So it's hard for the melancholic sometimes to say, this is my opinion, this is what I think. That's easy for the sanguines, easy for the cholerics, difficult for the melancholics and the cholerics. However, what's interesting is once they make a decision, it's locked in. I would also say, of all the temperaments, if you're friends with a melancholic, and melancholics will not have the most Facebook friends or the most contacts on LinkedIn or connections on LinkedIn, they're not into the quantity. I mean, they really aren't into the quantity of relationships. It's all quality. 1 or 2 good relationships, and a melancholic can be off to the races and live a very happy life. Now, you want to encourage them to probably have more than that. But that's the way they think. It's all quality. If you're ever walking down an aisle at a store and you see someone stopping and turning the cereal package over and reading the small print, you can bet $1.50 that's a melancholic. Or they write SOP manuals for every organization. And what do you do with those? You get them, you thank them, you put them on the shelf, on the library shelf, and you never look at them again. Well, okay, they can use it as a book stop maybe or door stop, but the melancholics will actually not only read them, they write them. And not only that, I've even seen them refer to them. Wait a second, let me tell you how we do this. And she will get it and look it up and tell you. So this kind of attention to detail is a wonderful gift. Thank God it exists, right? Thank God we have people paying attention to the details on things, but it's very different than the other temperaments. And the melancholics are a little surprised that the rest of the world isn't like that. Why doesn't the rest of the world do it? I have a melancholic leader. She's just kind of gone up a couple notches. And I said, she's in charge of getting some data in on a frequent basis. And I go, are you going to send out reminders? She goes, I shouldn't have to. By the way, this is classic melancholic thinking. The policy went out. Everybody got the memo. Why should I have to say anything? Well, I said, I don't know. I mean, it's probably the same reason my doctor calls me 3 times before my appointment. The dentist does the same. They want to make sure it gets in on time, so you might try that. So this is just foreign thinking, why you would have to do that. Or I remember I was working with a melancholic leader, and I go, you want to show more interest in your employees. That doesn't come naturally to the melancholic. To go walking down the halls and, hey, how was your weekend? So we rehearsed it together. So pretend I'm a person you can care less about down the hall, but I report to you. So just try it, see how it goes. Okay, how was your, I'm not joking. How was your weekend? And then I start talking about the soccer game for my kids. She goes, what happens if I can't stand that? I said, actually, that's very likely to happen. I'm also a melancholic. I can relate. But you offer it up, to use a common phrase that melancholics really like a lot. In other words, the point is melancholics sometimes need a bit of a nudge on the interpersonal side. Once they cross over, they're lifelong friends. I think there's an uncommonly large number of teachers and maybe clergy, at least priests, I think, that tend to be melancholic. And why? Well, they have a great love for going depth. Teachers love to learn. They might not be that interested in making a lot of money, and so melancholics usually don't worry so much about making a lot of money. They want to do the right thing. They want to do the noble thing. I want to sell an idea to a melancholic. I find, what's the noble thing to do here? Let's do that. And I think that's how they relate to things. They're very interested in the depth of the church. They actually like holy hours. I've seen melancholics do 75-minute holy hours. Sanguines, as soon as it hits 31 minutes, they round up and they're out of there, okay? So, why not give everybody every natural gift? And he said, if he was to give everybody every natural gift, then we would not be aware of our dependence upon him. All right? We would shut ourselves off from him and eventually shut ourselves off from each other, and we really couldn't be saved. So our weaknesses in our temperament, which, by the way, are not moral weaknesses, they're just things that don't come as easily, are really our opportunity to turn to Christ and ask him to enter into our life and let him take over and help us to grow. That's our comments on the temperaments. Thank you very much.
At this one company where I was working, I was what they call a junior executive. The next step for me was to become a vice president, and so I was with all the other directors, and we had these trainings, and I met this one guy in there who had a gift for reading people. He could talk to you and know if you were just full of it like that. And he used it to be able to navigate himself in the company. And I remember one day I was sitting down at lunch, and he was across the cafeteria, and when I looked at him, I sort of heard a voice say to me that I had given him the gift of discernment for my glory, but he uses it for his own. So God gives you gifts. Use them for him, not for yourself. And I've been praying for that gentleman ever since then, because I'm like, well, Lord, let him be able to glorify you in his gift of discernment, in his corporate job, in some kind of way. But it also called to myself, Lord, how can I, with the gifts you've given me, glorify you? Please, Lord, don't ever let it be about me. And you need to have that conversation with the Lord. You can ask him, Lord, what gifts have you given me? How do you want me to use them? And be willing to use them however he asks you to. Remember, it could be stuff you don't like to do. Same here. I got gifts that I don't want to do it. But it's not about what I want, it's about what he wants. I have a gift, and maybe some of you as well, in diffusing tense situations. How did I discover that? From being in tense situations. I remember one in particular, I didn't understand New Yorkers. And we had to take a cab. I was with a young lady from New York, and we had to take a cab to New Jersey. Well, the cab pulls up in New Jersey, and the fare is significantly more than we expected. This was the pre-Uber days. And she is going off in the cab. And so we're getting out of the car, and the cab driver's getting out of the car, and I'm like, this is terrible. And so it was such a scene as she was going off, and that these guys came out off their stoop and was coming over to see, like, what's happening. And I was like, we're going to die out here because this chick cannot control her anger. And so I said, okay, just a moment. And she was insulting the driver, calling him a thief and all these kinds of things. And it was just a matter of miscommunication. He didn't explain to us that there was an extra charge from going into New York to New Jersey because it was written up on the visor of the cab, and it just was a miscommunication. And so I said to them, sir, we are not trying to call you a thief. I'm sure that was not your intention. It just wasn't made clear to us about this surcharge. And I have the extra money to pay for you. And my girlfriend still wanted to jump him. But I could see how the guys were responding to it, like, wow, that was a nice way to bring it down a bit. Now, if I'd had my druthers, I'd prefer not to be in that tense situation. But sometimes it's like that. Sometimes it's when you're in those particular situations that you discover that you have a particular gift. Now, you have to ask yourself, what's your intention when you're about to do something? What is your intention? How are you going to meet your goal? Your intention should always be to act with integrity and honor, even if those around you are not. That's going to serve you well. Let me give you an example. I like to give examples because sometimes it's nice to say something, but it's even better to give an example. When I was in corporate America trying to climb that ladder, I had to deal with some, I'll just say unethical people. And we were in a situation where and I don't know why the company did this, but they were letting us know that they were cutting management and we all had to compete. I think it was like 3 of us or 6 of us competing for one job. And what they did is they rearranged our teams. And so the staff that I had was given to somebody else. I got somebody else's staff, and then we had all these new goals. And the other managers would come to my staff and give them assignments for their own team. Do you understand what I'm saying? So that means that would take them away from doing what I needed done to get my goals. My job was in competition with all these other people. And I just thought, that's not nice. So I went to this one manager in particular, and I said, I understand we all are trying to get this work done, but please do not assign tasks or come to my staff and give them work and take them away from their goal. Oh, yeah, sure, we're not going to do that. Happened again. And my team member came to me and said, I know you said this. I said, well, why don't you tell her no? And he's like, because she's a powerful woman like you, and I'm afraid. I'm afraid what will happen to my career if I say no. I said, all right, come with me, sit in the corner, say nothing. So I went in the office. Okay. Well, because I needed to take him with me to her office to tell her, remind her we had this agreement, we had this conversation. Maybe I wasn't clear. So, for example, what you just did with Britt, that's a no-no. And that sort of violates what we've agreed upon. She was turning red in the face because I was honest. I assumed good motivations on her part, that maybe it was just I wasn't clear about what it was that we were agreeing upon. So here's a specific example. And I was direct. But I had integrity. I didn't want to go in there to embarrass her. I went in there because I'm assuming, well, maybe I wasn't clear when we had that agreement. It came to be, I was clear, she was just operating unethically. But it didn't mean I needed to stoop to that level. It continued, even after that, to the point where I had to move my staff to a completely different building on the campus. Well, that made the VP angry with me. Why'd you move them? I'm trying to get a cohesive unit. I didn't throw her under the bus because I wanted to have integrity. I said I moved my team because we needed to focus on the very important goals you want us to achieve, and there were too many distractions in the other building. But if you would prefer us to move back, we can do that. Just let me know what it is that you wish. Because I understood it sort of hurt my VP's ego that I just kind of unilaterally moved my team without talking to her. And I was like, because I got goals to get done, and I'm not dealing with the nonsense, and I don't need to come in and try to throw everybody under the bus. Needless to say, I got the job, and the rest of them got fired. But I never stooped to their level, even though the way they were doing things seemed to look like success for them. Your gift is always going to be something that doesn't require you to sell out your values and your integrity. If you're starting to do that, that's not about gift, that's about ego. And sometimes you learn about your gifts through what appears to be a failure. You can't look at how the world measures success to determine your success. What was your intention? Did you have integrity? Is there something you can do about it? If it's not, don't worry about it. If you can't do anything about it, don't worry about it. If you can do something about it, still don't worry about it. Because the point of all of this is for us to really get to heaven. Now, some people may say, oh, my gifts have to deal with, we always have this narrow idea around holy things and our gifts, and we have this narrow idea that only has to be around X. Well, everything is God's. And whatever situation you're in, he wants you to use your gifts to glorify him. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to say his name and glory to God. Sometimes it's just how you comport yourself. Think about the last time you were in a really uncomfortable situation and you were tempted to just do something that totally goes against your moral code. Like punch somebody in the face. You don't do it. You don't do it because you know it's wrong and you know that's not the way. It might have a temporary feeling of feeling good, but it's against what your goals are, and it's really against your gifts. It's against who you are as a daughter made in the image and likeness of God. Why? Because you don't treat another image of God in that way. And that's that other person in front of you, even if they're acting beneath who they are. It's not about how they behave, but it's about who you are. And that's something that I think is going to help you in discovering your gifts. And the other thing I want to say is you have to embrace whatever your responsibilities are. That'll be another way that you discover what your gifts are. Sometimes people think being married and being a mother, oh, I have no time for me. Maybe that's the point. Maybe it's the point that you have to always think about somebody else. Maybe that is the point. And you're thinking about how can I help them? How can I best love them? How can I serve them? What do I have that I could help or give to this particular person? And that's motherhood wrapped up in a nutshell for you right there. And the love that you have also, I think, pulls out what your gifts are, makes you do what you think you could never do before. This is how you discover your gifts. You're going to have to try. You're going to have to explore. You're going to have to embrace your responsibilities, all the while maintaining your integrity and checking your intentions. You have to do some self-examination. But you also have to take that step out to do, to act. Maybe some people have some anxiety about it, but you do it nonetheless. Now, as a woman, because that was one of the questions, how do we embrace our gifts as women, to help us figure out our mission? I think it's very difficult to figure out a lot of things because there's so many mixed messages, well, I shouldn't say mixed messages, just straight up lies in the media about what it means to be a woman. I would say your best bet is to not look towards secular media for figuring out what it is you should have as a goal as a woman. Because if they had their druthers, I won't even say it because it's not even nice. You'd be living in a way that's just so chaotic and contrary to your being if you followed the dictates of the world. Yes, you are a woman. You are female. You didn't think yourself into being female. It's a reality. You get what I'm saying? Yeah. Yes, your body reacts to sex differently than men. You can get pregnant, and that's all right. That's a good thing. Yes, we get married and have children and have to care for our children. Think about that. That's a good thing. That's not going to be contrary to your gifts. That's not going to impede your success. Sometimes I think it helps you with your success because there's nothing like focusing on getting something done when you know you need to go get your kid at 3 o'clock. So do not look at what the world sets aside for you as how you should be. Rather, embrace what it is that God has given you as women. Whether you get married or not, whether you actually have children or not, there are special things about us that prepare us for those roles that you can still use in every other thing that you do. Think about that. Embrace that. And I would also say what helped me in figuring out my gifts is I have a good crew of female friends that tell me about myself. You need to have good friends that are honest with you, that'll guide you, that'll mentor you, that'll help you look at a situation from more than just your perspective. And sometimes they can see your gifts and you can't. And they will encourage you. Sometimes we do need that encouragement. It was funny, the Uber driver on the way over here was like, sis, you got this. I think you're going to be just fine because you got me engaged right now as we're talking in the car. And then that's when he revealed to me that his mother was a pastor. And she always talked to him about you have a special gift that God has given you. And you will figure out and achieve whatever it is when you understand your gifts and embrace them. And I was like, go ahead, Holy Spirit speaking through you. He's like, I never talk to people in the car, never. He said, but you got in and something said, talk to this lady. And so we were talking about gifts, and I was like, oh, you're just going to bless all these ladies. His name was Tehran. I was like, Tehran, you're just going to bless all these ladies today by this. And Tehran's message, which I have to agree with, is he says, and tell these ladies that sometimes the world's not really set up for them to win. as women, but to hold true to who they are as daughters made in the image and likeness of God. And I was like, hold up. What? You know, and he's right. And I think he was getting at the very things that I was talking about. You know, they will have you believe, you saw the 180 CEOs sign this stuff that said, don't ban equality, where they said that, you know, we need to have abortion, otherwise it's going to be economic hardship for our employees. To me, that was a message to the women that work there, that we expect you not necessarily be mothers. And you've got abortion as a backdrop to help you economically succeed. Ignore that. That's a lie. Don't buy into that frame. And let's pray for those sisters that work at those companies, because what kind of message are they getting? But this is how, stepping out into the world, this is the framing that they'd like to set for us. Break the frame. Don't let that box you in. Don't look at things as the world does. Keep stepping forward. Have that integrity. Think about your intentions. Have good intentions. Embrace your responsibilities. I know I'm saying this over and over, because these are things that were important for me and how I discovered my gifts. Get a good group of friends who can help you assess things and tell you when your slip is hanging. You know what I mean? Right? You walking all around, your slip is hanging, none of your girls telling you. I'm like, what kind of friends are they? Well, it's the same thing, right? Seriously. It's the same thing. How are you going to be walking around just all messed up and they all see it? And I was like, who's going to tell her? I'm not telling her. They're not your friends. Yeah, you have to get friends to tell you your slip is hanging. But so these are the things that I think will help you discovering your gifts, living out your gifts, not being fearful of your gifts, and recognizing that, again, that your gifts are not for your glory, but for the glory of God. And I know I've only got like 19 seconds left, and I wanted to leave time for questions. Maybe I'll see you all during the break, but I want to reiterate, you do have gifts. God has given them to you. Embrace them, embrace your responsibility, and you're going to do fine, and let's all make it to heaven together. Amen.